Hello everyone. Today we have Kamlesh with us. The aim of this talk is of this podcast is to essentially learn about what exactly front enders, what are technologies front end folks use on a daily basis. So yep, Kamlesh, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I am Kamlesh. I work as a principal engineer at Razorpay. Precisely, I work on design systems and infrastructure about front end. So, essentially, I'm like this quite about the gaps that exist between engineering and product teams, and then engineering and design teams. And I really love to bridge them by building the right tools instead of forming human processes. Because why do we rely on humans, right? Like if tools can help us achieve our tasks, then why do we even rely on human processes? Um, and apart from my daily work, I regularly keep on blogging. So if you're interested, you can head on to kamleshchandani.com. And there are a couple of blogs that I write about tech plus non-tech plus how do we work in teams or culture and things like that. So
Awesome.
yeah,
I'll definitely link that in the description. So yeah, that's pretty much that's a good way to put what exactly a front end developer does. But I would still need to want to dig in and understand like what exactly front end development is, because the definition of front end development and the kind of work we do has been changing since 2013, right? Like the kind of work which folks used to do before that, or maybe this decade and before that decade, it's completely changed. So what is the current definition of front end developer? Like what do we folks do? Yeah.
I mean, this is we are right now at least in an era where we are again going back to what we used to do in like 2000 those years, because right now front end also has a lot of responsibilities. So before going to that, I'll just talk about like what a front end developer does. So I mean, when you say front end, it's like we build interfaces. That's what front end is all about. Like we build interfaces that is basically the point of contact for users or any of the people who interact with our product or any of our projects. So that's literally what front end is. I mean, the better way to put it as is like a user interface developer. But over the
UI.
time, it
Yeah.
has too much that we had to come up with a term called front end, because front end developers these days do a lot of things. It's a big chunk. If I have to split it, I mean, this is again inspired from what Brad Frost talks about front end. So right now, the front end is divided into a couple of parts. So there's this front end, which is the people working on the interfaces, and then there's back of front end, basically people who work on the
Data
API
layer.
interaction or fetching data layer, plus also the tools that you work with. Let's say you are very much enthusiastic about working on Webpack, how your build system works, how do you basically build your applications and things like that. So that's like everything which is like a compiler level stuff that is like a back of a front end. So it's like that's where that people moved away from a term called UI and made it more generic, which is front end development.
True, true.
So back in like 2013, we were literally UI developers. Now we are again going to front end developers. And now there's like whole lot of new things, which is now you are a product front end engineer or a platform front end engineer. So it's like kind of emerging based on the responsibilities that the front end developers take upon.
But which one do you think you're more, aligned towards your role specifically?
Basically, personal on a personal level.
Yes, yes.
So I am mostly on the interface building part of it, but because I have to look after a lot of things, which also adds something which is on the back of a front end.
Okay.
So it's like somewhere in the between, but the split is more towards the UI part of it, which is like which are interfaces that the real people see.
Gotcha. Sure. And how did you get into front end? Because I don't know when you started off, but back then this kind of divisions and segregations did not exist, right? So there was just front end, yeah. Especially for anyone who's
Yeah.
starting off, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started off, there was this term called full stack engineers, where it's like you do front end, you do back end, and everything. Because there was not really job openings for front end. Because honestly, when the software development industry started evolving, UI didn't exist back then. It was like you
True.
had to do a lot of things, and UI was part of your role, not majority, but part of your role. So even when I had started off, it was mostly kind of mixed. But I used to enjoy a lot on the interfaces building part of it, because, and the reason precisely behind that was it gives you literal gratification, that okay, when you are building something, you can see it visually in front of your eyes. That's literally
Instant
where
feedback.
I kind of slipped into. Exactly, it's like instant feedback. You literally can see what you are building. But when it, like, I didn't find myself exciting enough when I was working on few of the backend parts. So it felt like kind of very boring, or it felt like, okay, I have this Postman and everything where I just keep on hitting APIs and I do a lot of stuff. But the moment it comes to front end, I used to find myself very, very, exciting to work on it. So
Right.
that's how I kind of tricked into front end, and it has been stick after that, and it is right now with me. So yeah.
Nice, nice. So, like, right now, if you talk about 2021, right? If someone, comes up one day and says that my aim this year to, get a job in front end, like in the industry as front end by, let's say today is Jan, by August or something. So, what roadmap would you want, someone to take so that at least they get a not even a job, even an internship should work out. So, what should be the basic roadmap one should cover according to you? Yeah.
I would say that before even you applying for a job, the first thing is you need to get some confidence that okay, you is front end exciting for you, right? Because like I have found a lot of folks uh, who are like kind of confused and they pick front end because maybe it's the bigger community, or
Mhm.
maybe they see people in their network who are mostly working
Yep.
on front end. So the first thing would be to first figure out your interest, and that interest can be figured out if you can, if someone can work on very, very small project. Like it doesn't has to be a very big massive project where you lose interest, but it has to be very, very small thing where you take a balance of both things. Let's say you're working something on a backend in the sense, let's say you basically create an endpoint where you just say, okay, give me the data, like, and it could be a static data, you don't have to go into building databases and stuff. And then you basically take that data and see how you can put it on front end, how you can show it on front end, how you can basically feel about it, like how, like, you can compare it with the day-to-day apps that you're using and try to take some inspiration and apply to your the front end that you build. So in a nutshell, to answer your question rightly, it's like you have to start from somewhere, and that starting point is, unless and until you build something, you can't just
True.
understand that okay, whether you're enjoying or you are not enjoying. So you have to like just start building up very, very, very small projects. Like it doesn't has to be like a week long project as well. Like it could be very, very 2 days or a 3 days project as well. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of, like, for an example, to just give you a very simple example, it's like just build a small UI where you say, okay, take a username of, like, take a GitHub username of a person, just click on search and you just list down the repositories of that username. That's it. That's like the simplest app that you can create.
You'll touch a lot of part while doing this. That's interesting. Yep. I also like in terms of front end. I also like the idea that it has like both creative part and logical part as well, right? It has got both the aspect. For backend developer, it's more towards there's not much creativity involved, right? So yeah. But nowadays, I see a lot of freshers, jumping directly to the framework and skipping JavaScript at all, like completely skipping JavaScript, right? So, like, do you recommend doing that, or do you think?
See, absolutely, there's no problem in doing that.
Mhm.
I personally like that approach because when you are starting off, right, and honestly, content is so massive that if you go step by step, you are probably gonna get frustrated
True.
because there's too much to learn, right? The learning curve is huge. So, and someone who's starting off, like, who just wants to jump into front end, there's no harm literally using these frameworks. Like, you can just use those frameworks because there are so many things already built for you. You can just
Exactly.
utilize them and then start learning. The benefit that you do is, like, in the end, see, these frameworks, they don't hide away JavaScript from you, right? It's just that a level of abstraction. But to work on that abstraction level as well, you need to gain certain familiarity with the language, which is JavaScript, right? And basically, my way of working is like learn things as you go. Because let's say today I learn, like, let's say today I invest in understanding a lot of data structure. Let's say we did so many tree traversals, graph traversals, algorithms back then in college, right? But do we remember any of them? No. The problem is that we didn't had a real use case to
Exactly.
implement them. Versus if I tell you that, okay, I'm going to build a application, let's say, again, going back to the same GitHub application, which is like you take the username, you hit search, and you basically get the list of repositories, right? Which is like the task is very, very small, but when you're trying to do this, right, when you're actually implementing it in the code, you might go into, okay, how do I iterate in JavaScript? Because you need to iterate on the list of the repositories, right? And then you say, okay, how do I basically add click handlers? So when you say click handlers, then you say, okay, when I'm hitting the click handler, I also need to get the ID of that repository. If someone clicks on that repository and they want to go to the github.com and see that repository, right?
Yep.
So it's like, in the end, you are learning, but it's like you are learning them indirectly. But that's a
Indirectly.
better way because
Because
you
interesting,
can
right?
relate to it.
Exactly, relate
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
It's like you're contextually doing it. And when, like, personally, when I do things or when I learn stuff, new stuff, I don't just go understanding all the things under the hood. I start with what I want to achieve. And when I'm achieving it, then I go, okay, why was this done? How is this functioning? And when you, like, when your process is that, you would basically learn a lot of things in your context. So you're not
Right,
overwhelmed with the new things and a lot of things.
right. Sure. That's a great way to
Yeah.
put it. I also want to talk a bit about CSS ecosystem. So where do you think it's going? Like we have SaaS, we have utility first functions like Tailwind, we have CSS and JS, right? So where do you think it's heading to? Or do you think a new pattern will arise in 2021? Anything could happen, right?
I'm not sure. It's a very, very controversial topic and also very debatable because honestly, in the end, it drills down to what are your personal opinions or what are your comfortable way of working with it. Few people like working on SaaS. There's no harm. Few people like working with Tailwind, and it's absolutely amazing because it gives you a lot of guidelines when you're creating a new project. So you don't have to put your head. So it's like when I think about Tailwind, I think about someone giving me a helping hand to
Yeah.
create nice interfaces. So it's like I don't have to put my head and mess around with a lot of CSS properties. It's like few, like you can consider it framework for CSS. Similarly, on those lines. So you have a lot of guidelines in place. You use them and you get instant gratification. Okay, I wanted to achieve this thing without doing much of the hassle and invest a lot of your brains.
Mhm.
And then CSS and JS, that's like again a whole set of a different spectrum where people who are working on JavaScript, they also wanted to work on writing CSS right inside their
JavaScript.
JavaScript code. And that's where it's like kind of heading. And there's no harm. Like it's like it depends what you are comfortable working with.
Right. What the team is comfortable working with.
Yeah.
I
Even
also
at
want.
individual, even at an individual level, you can basically do whatever you are comfortable with. There's no harm because in the end, all of them render CSS on the page, right? It's just a different way of getting to the destination. So whatever you feel comfortable and wherever you see that this is the less learning curve for you, maybe you can pick that and be done with it.
Cool. I also want to touch on another controversial topic, like what's your take on React.js versus Next.js versus Gatsby?
Uh,
That's a huge question, right? Altogether.
yeah. So I mean, see, again, so the way Tailwind is for your CSS, right? I think Next.js and Gatsby are for your React ecosystem. Again, because when you are starting off with React, right? React is a library, right, which gives you a lot of bare bones so that you can pick whatever you want. Next.js and Gatsby are like frameworks which pushes you so that you can build better websites or let's say a high performant website or let's say building the websites the right way. So when you're starting off with React, let's say either you can use Create React app, which is like gives you a set of tools so that you can set sort of all your Webpack, Babel, and all those things, so you don't have to deal with them.
Yep.
Next.js basically is again a layer on top of React.js, which gives you a lot of simpler ways to achieve, let's say, to build products or product or your websites end to end. Let's say if you want to, you basically don't know how to add routing to your pages. You say, okay, whatever, I need to have a very, very simpler way of putting. I have a folder where I put all my pages, and whenever I put my pages into that particular directory, let's say pages, all of them becomes my routes. So you don't have to mess around saying that, okay, whatever is defined in this directory becomes the route. Next.js does that for you. Second, you want to sort out, let's say, I want to build performance and I want to get that how performant is my website. So
Mm-hmm.
Next.js again gives you small functions or like hooks. You can type and it will just spit out metrics saying that how your website is performing. Again, you want to let's say you want to build, so in front end ecosystem, you basically everything comes to one single JavaScript bundle, right? That's what get rendered. So
Yep.
to break it down into, or let's say you want to make your app performant, what you do is you basically split it into different parts, and there are again different heuristics and different strategies of what you want to do. So again, Next.js takes out that for you, and you basically just give it, or you just write the code or your application logic, and all the build infrastructure is just taken away by Next.js for you. Versus Gatsby. Gatsby is again, it helps you to simplify uh, your data fetching logic as well.
Yep.
Apart from building your beautiful interfaces, it also helps you to take away or simplify your data fetching logic. That's
Mm-hmm.
basically how it does it with their GraphQL layer. And again, Gatsby is going towards in an era where they are saying that where they want to build, they are like static site generators. Like everything in the end is compiled to HTML pages, which you can just host it anywhere. So you don't really have a backend as
Mm-hmm.
such. But because whenever you build your app, all the data fetching that you wrote, it runs at that point of time.
Yep.
So it's a different, it's solving a different problem altogether.
Right. Right.
So Gatsby is basically for people who have different destinations from where the data comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say few people have CMSs attached to it, and they want to get the data from there. Marketing folks want to build very like highly engaging websites with highly content heavy, but they also have some sort of data store where they put in their data. So
Yep.
again, you build a UI on top of it, you build it, and then you get a HTML page which is some sort of dynamicity attached to it, and then you just host your HTML pages to some CDN. So they are like kind of like Next.js and Gatsby are like framework on top of React.
Yep.
So we can't say React versus Gatsby or Next.js, but it is like they are complementing each other. Like without React, Gatsby and Next wouldn't have existed.
True.
So
True.
they
True.
are a layer on top of React.js. So it's like the underlying architecture is React. And then they're trying to solve a lot of different problems. So in the end, their whole agenda is that as someone who is working on front end, you should not be overwhelmed with a lot of tools. Like why not tools take a lot of take all the heavy lifting from you,
Mm-hmm.
and you just focus on building the product. That's
Right.
what
Right.
these both these tools are trying to do.
True.
So
True.
again, they
True.
have their own benefit. They don't. It's not Gatsby versus Next.js, but it's like either you pick Gatsby based on your uses, or you pick Next.js based on what your use case is. So it's like use case driven.
You're trying to be as clean as possible. I like that. Sure. So, okay. So also wanted to cover a bit about state managements, right? So now there are a lot of way you can like there are a lot of libraries, right? But again, the question comes down to do we actually need state management tools, or like what is the perfect time to think about, okay, now it's the good time to have some state management solution which could be handled externally rather than the library or the existing framework which one is using.
So can you elaborate a bit, like for if you can give me an example?
So for example, like let's just take up one scenario, right? I'm building a product, right? So at what point do I know that I would want an external state management tool solution? And if I do, which one should I go ahead with? How do I decide that? Yeah.
Yeah. So these state management libraries, right? Whatever the libraries that they exist in the ecosystem as of today, they again are very much dependent on what your use cases are. So if you're building a very simple application, which is like
Mm-hmm.
you're just building a GitHub kind of a small application, you put in username, you get a list of repositories for a particular user. You precisely don't need state management
It's
libraries.
straightforward because
But
yeah.
yeah, but when your application gets to a point which is like which has like a which depends on a very heavy data structure,
Mm-hmm.
or you want to have some sort of data structure because your application code is getting messed up. At that point of time, you probably want to introduce some sort of state management libraries into your code. Again, don't just blindly go in saying, okay, Redux is good, or let's say I want to use a lot of Redux middlewares, or I want to use React Query or any sort of state management libraries, because I've seen that people go saying that I want to use this state management library. Rather, the approach that I feel comfortable with is like, can I still use React native React's internal state management, which is like just plain use state,
Hmm.
or maybe use reducer, which is in the latest version.
Hooks,
If
yeah.
I am able to get, if I'm able to get my application up and working, I probably don't need another layer of complexity in my project. So it's like, first chase simplicity and then see, okay, at some point of time you would realize that okay, my application code is getting messed up. That is the time where you take a decision that what is the library that can take away this overhead from me. Because
Right.
what happens is, if you start with adding a lot of libraries in the beginning, you basically, like it's a chaotic thing that you, like you call it as apocalypse, where you end up into situations that you are not able to identify what is going wrong, right? So it's like, I usually chase simplicity, that okay, I start simple, and then when the time comes, I'll replace it with something complex that can handle things for me.
All right, that's nice. Sure. Also wanted to cover a bit about TypeScript, right? So, like, how does one evaluate that the ROI of having TypeScript would be really good? So, for example, for a startup, what do you think if they're starting up, let's say building a MVP or something, right? Do you think they
Yeah.
would want to go ahead with TypeScript, or do you think JavaScript will be the way to go ahead with? Or at what point do you think TypeScript would be good? Because the reason I'm asking, as I know that at Razorpay, I think all the new products are currently running on TypeScript, and the existing projects are some way or another migrating to TypeScript, right? So
Yeah. So I mean, see, investing in TypeScript is a very, very huge investment.
it's a huge
So let's say
decision
if
as
you
well. Yeah.
are, yeah. So if you are starting up, and let's say you are a very, very small team, let's say 2 to 3 developers, and if, assuming if these developers are not comfortable with TypeScript, it's absolutely fine. You can just start off with using basic JavaScript as well.
Yep.
But if these 2, 3 developers are very, very confident with TypeScript and they know all the pain points of TypeScript, there's no, again, there's no harm. The whole point of adding TypeScript is, a lot of time what happens is, um, if you are not familiar and you are trying to build an MVP as a startup, right? Your end goal is to get something out, right? Because in the end, your users don't care what you are trying to build, like what tech stack you are using. In the end, it
Mhm.
all boils down to what you are giving them out. So when you're starting up and you are a very, very small team and you don't have people who have familiarity or expertise in TypeScript, I would probably say don't go ahead with that. Like it's okay to start with JavaScript, basic JavaScript, and not have types at all. Second, like again, if you are comfortable, go ahead, because TypeScript has some set of setup and infrastructure cost as well. Like like making it work with a lot of tools sometimes becomes too trickier. So when you are a small startup or building an MVP, I would rather say not invest time in all those areas, which will slow you down in the end. So, and then there's this whole sort of a different thing when you are actually growing and when you are scaling up, or your company is scaling up, right? You probably want to identify that okay, this is the right time to invest in TypeScript, because again, you have to figure out or identify certain things, right? Like when we introduced TypeScript at Razorpay, right? We didn't go blind that okay, because TypeScript is fancy, we will add it. We literally identified okay, what are the pain points, what are our breaking points, where like if we don't have TypeScript, what are the pain points, what is the problem that our products are suffering, and where are our developers investing most of their time, right?
Mhm.
If our developers are investing most of their time in figuring out okay, what was the data structure that came from backend, our components receive wanted certain set of blueprint or a object structure which it didn't satisfy, and things are breaking because of that in your production, or people are spending a lot of time in that area. That's precisely how we identified okay, TypeScript, we this is the high time we want to invest in TypeScript.
All
So it's
right.
like identify the use case. It differs at every stage of time.
Sure. And so do you think for any front end application, like performance is a crucial thing? Like how crucial is performance like for any application?
It is so again it goes with what is like who's your target audience.
Mhm.
So I'll take two examples, right? First example, consumer facing applications. For an example, Swiggy, Tribo, Flipkart, right? They their target audience are people who are actually consuming some of the products, right? So for them, performance is crucial because, for an example, if there's a vacation season that is going on, right? So Tribo won't want that their application is performing poorly, and because of which their drop-offs would
Losing. Yep.
increase because that's a peak season. That's a peak season for them. Similarly, if let's say there's a IPL going on where Swiggy tied up with Hotstar, right? So their load would be very very high, right? So again, if Swiggy fails to place an order at that point of time, or Swiggy fails to deliver an order at that point of time, or their tracking is not intact, that's again the drop off for them. Similarly, for Flipkart, if there are like Big Billion Days or Independence Day sale, Republic Day sale, if the web page takes a lot of time to load, they are again going to have a lot of drop offs. Like they'll
True.
literally lose. Their sales will drastically impact. So these are like consumer facing applications where your performance is tied to what your user perceives. So if your website is slow or fast, how fast it is, how slow it is, right? So your performance metrics literally changes. Now let's take an example of something like Razorpay, right? Where our consumers are not the people who are placing some orders, right? They are people who are paying us for that product that they use. So it's like a B2B product that they use, right? So performance for them is something broke in the production because of which our web page didn't render, right? That's the frustrating point for them,
Yep.
right? And they will literally get annoyed because they are paying for that product, correct? Second, they are, let's say there are a couple of drop downs on a page and they are getting some data from some API calls. Now there are like 5 drop downs. You have to select something from each of them and then you hit search, for an example, and basis of those selection you get some data displayed. Now imagine these 5 drop downs, they are getting data from 5 different endpoints. Now one of those endpoints fail, so it's not the problem of the backend. They might have some triggers, but it's literally how you handle it on front end. So
Yep.
that is again a performance. Like, what are the API response times that you are basically getting because of which your users are getting annoyed. So performance is very very important in all these different types of companies. But what metrics you chase depends what is your target audience.
But can you give
But
me
again, when you
some can you give me some example on like what kind of metrics usually one should measure?
yeah, so I mean the straightforward way or like a blanket statement is if you are using Chrome, go ahead, audit your website against Lighthouse. It's there in the DevTools,
Mhm.
right? So it will give you a very very good bifurcation of each and every metrics. For example, the very very countable metrics are uh, time to first contentful page, which is
Yes.
like what is the time when your user sees something on your screen, may be it some loading boxes or something, but what is the first time that they see it? Because no one likes that spinners, right? So if you give them some contextual thing, okay, something is coming over here,
Or
that is
maybe a
your first
skeleton
content.
load or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like therefore that's the first contentful page. Like that's the primary metrics that everyone uses, right? Then you say, what is the first meaningful content, right? So for an example, you showed some skeleton screens, right? But what is the meaningful content, right? For an example, on YouTube, the meaningful content is the video, right? So how much time does it take to even load the thumbnail of that video? Like
Yep.
forget about the starting point. So that's like the meaningful content. So that's like the second step. You're progressing. You first showed some skeleton, then you move to some things which gives you context. Okay, something is appearing, and then the third metric or the third way to progress it is what is your time to interactivity. Like the like something is loading and it is very obvious that your user would start clicking. So for an example, in case of YouTube, right, as soon as a thumbnail comes in with that button, you just try to hit on play.
Yeah.
Now how fast your website basically gives that feedback back to the user that okay, that button is triggered, right? Because a lot of things, like most of the things on this page is JavaScript, and again JavaScript is blocking. People pay the cost of downloading the JavaScript bundle, and then passing it and then executing it, right? Which means it looks very simple. We are working on high performance browsers and high performance machines, but to the end user, it might sometimes look very frustrating. So
Yes.
these are like the three metrics, and then the other metric is which is like cumulative layout shift, right? So that's basically, for an example, uh, you have a banner on top of your page, correct? So assume the layout looks like you have a banner, and then you have something as a banner image, which is your hero image that you typically call, and then your content flows. Now this banner is typically a marketing banner which says, okay, have you installed our app? Or they are saying, okay, the sale is going on,
Mhm.
and it shows the countdown timer, right? Now the cumulative layout shift is basically, assume that your JavaScript is not organized, or the way things get rendered, they are out of order, or they are not in order, right? So what happens is, you would first show that hero banner image, then some content, but after some time, your marketing banner, which says the sale timer, that pops up, right? That literally shifts down all your content.
I
Now,
could
as a
literally,
user,
could literally feel it. It's super irritating, right?
yeah, so as a, like, to the human eyes, right? It literally creates that level of friction that, okay, what happened suddenly, right? So it's a fourth metric that you usually measure. So these are like the four metrics that are like very, very basic when you are actually measuring your application's performance. They give you the whole behavior of what your application is doing. And again, it depends product to product or person to person what matters to you.
Right.
As an individual, not all of them would matter, but yeah, few of them, like contentful paint and interactivity, is what matters
The most.
the most.
Sure, sure, sure. Like especially even for products like Razorpay checkout, right? Which is like used directly to the client, right? Not just dashboard. So even the performance of that is also really crucial. So yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to move back and talk a bit about monorepos as well. So, like again, we talked a bit about build steps and all, right? But how do you decide like this is the time for me to go ahead and build a monorepo rather than having something else?
Yeah. So monorepos are usually a very beautiful thing that has happened, right? The reason why I like them is it helps me to. So let's say if I have like two, three things that I'm working on. For an example, I'm building a UI components that I want to use in my projects, right? And then I'm also building a project that is using that UI component. Now, for an example site or a documentation site that uses those components, correct? Now imagine that I have two different repos that are using them. So for an example, UI components is a different and like different repo, and then I have a docs website that I'm creating, which is a different repo. But now it depends on this particular project, which is my UI components, right? Now, and if I'm constantly making changes to these UI components as well, I want instant feedback. I want my docs site to take the updated version of my packages, because that's my development time, right?
Yep.
Uh, but if I have two different repos, I have to either use npm link and then link it, which has problems on its own, or I have to publish it to something as on npm package, which is like latest or something like this, or let's say a next hyphen some version number.
Mm-hmm.
So this adds a lot of friction and hampers my developer experience and my
Yes.
development time. If both of these things are added into one repo, which is like a different, you are referring to a different folder altogether. So monorepos are like, if you're using some different packages, it's if I have to put it simply, it's like you are just using or importing few things from a different directory or a folder inside
Yep.
that particular project. So it now gives me a productivity boost that I change something over there and it instantly gets reflected in my another project. So I don't have to go through the mess of publishing the dummy version or do npm links and all those things. So it's like I contextually put things which can be grouped together and put them into one repo so that I can interuse each one of them at the same time.
Nice, nice. And what all tools do you recommend? Like I'm just aware of Yarn workspaces, but excluding that, are there any other tools, or are you also
Yeah,
a Yarn workspace fan?
yeah. So Yarn workspaces, even I'm usually using most of the time I use Yarn workspaces. When you're working at Rebo, we used to use Lerna as well. So Lerna again adds more flexibility on your workspaces. So
Okay.
these are like kind of two overlap. Like Yarn is like, you can say, two or three features of Learner is what Yarn Workspaces gives you. But
Okay.
the good part about Yarn Workspaces is that you don't have to go into the mess of configuring your repos. You just
Okay.
add a field called workspaces in your package JSON, and then add the packages that you want to be interlinked, and Yarn
It
will take care
handles
of it.
everything.
But
Yeah.
if you want, yeah, but if you have to enhance it, you basically add things like Learner on top of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I had actually written a blog about it as well, like what is Yarn Workspaces versus Learner, or how do we actually go about using it. So it's
Okay.
already there on the blog if you want to link that in the
Sure, I'll do that.
description.
Sure, sure. I will
Yeah.
also read that. So yeah, cool. And now I want to move back to again base level, right? So now at 2021, if you want to architect an app, right? So what all things would you actually consider, like high level things?
Okay, that's a
Uh,
trickiest one.
it's
So
not an
I'll
interview,
first,
chill. It's a discussion.
yeah. So the first, I'll just talk about what are the most specific things that I would want. The first thing is I want my linters to be set up, prettier
That
to be set up,
that goes
but
without
don't go
saying. Yeah.
into, yeah. Then I have my Webpack and my Babel setup, which is again how do I want to build it, right? Um then I'll first precisely go about choosing a framework or a library. If I'm doing something MVP and I want to build things very, very fast and get away from linters, prettiers, everything, I would rather blindly go ahead and choose Next.js. So that will basically sort my development stack.
Yeah.
Next stack is the next thing is if you want to do some fancy stuff, or you are building basically a product which is a consumer facing product, and you want to build something what do you say, very, very resilient, I would rather go ahead and start adding tests. So I'll just go ahead, start using Jest and add tests to my architecture.
Okay.
So that's like your development flow is sorted, your testing flow is sorted. So these will basically help me to develop things confidently
The
and
underlying
without.
structure is done basically.
Yeah, this is basically my base surface that I basically would start off with. uh, Now the next thing is all these things works on my machine, right? I don't want to go into the loop of saying, okay, this works on my localhost but doesn't works on production. So the next thing is I'll just go ahead and start adding CI, which is continuous integration, to it,
Hmm.
where I just run my tests, my linters, and see if my application builds. So that will basically give me confidence that okay, something is building, right? um, the next thing, like, again, I'll use GitHub Actions for most, or like I could achieve all of these things with GitHub Actions. And again, everything is in my repo, so yes, it's very hassle free to set it up.
Exactly.
Um, then there are a lot of GitHub Actions already available, which help you to take care of a lot of things. So for an example, we touched upon performance, right? I would go ahead and use Lighthouse action on as part of my
CI.
CI workflow. So whenever I raise a PR, right, this action would run in, and when it runs, it will basically audit my application, that if something is not breaking or my performance is not going down because of this,
Based on some threshold. Yeah.
based on some threshold. So now my continuous integration part is also sorted, right? So I sorted my surface level, then I sorted my CI level. Based now, once I have this, I'll just go ahead and merge things, right? Now the next part comes in deployment. Now, uh, I could use GitHub Actions as my CD as well, where I say whenever something gets merged to my master branch or my main branch,
Main branch. Yeah.
uh, so it directly gets auto deployed to some place. So I can again write an action for that as well. So with this, uh, I have taken away a lot of human processes or human jobs, right? I just say, okay, you develop something, you write tests, you commit it. You commit it, my CI checks would run. If your PR passes it, I'll merge it. When I merge it, it will automatically get deployed. So this is how I will basically go about my architecture. So instead of choosing the frameworks or like libraries, I would first define what are the areas that I want to fix or what are the areas that I want to solve for. Once this is solved, then it's just a matter of what tech stack or what library, whether React works for you, Vue works for you, Svelte works.
Yeah. Over this, anything could come in, right?
It's absolute, yeah. Exactly. So after this, I can then go into the specifics of what framework I want to choose. But this is like the base thing that I actually want. Like I would basically want to have from my personal projects.
Interesting, sure. I think this will go even
Yeah.
for any large scale projects as well, but yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Sure. So wanted to discuss the last bit on a bit about hiring as well. So like how important are portfolios for, front end folks? And
Hmm.
if they are important, then what tech stack would you recommend like at this point of time?
At this point of time, if you are looking out for a job specifically and you want to, like, you have a bunch of projects, you want to showcase them, and you don't have time to invest in the efforts of creating something fancy portfolio. I would rather suggest go ahead and start using Notion. You can
That's
organize a lot
interesting.
of go ahead, start organizing your stuff on Notion, link it to whatever videos or demos you want. So it's like that's the first step. Like you want to look for a job, you don't want to invest in creating portfolio websites. You just want to show like portfolio websites are basically what it is. Like you want to showcase some of your work, right?
Yep.
Start with something which is very, very simple. I would recommend Notion. I have seen a lot of good portfolios being built on top of Notion. And then throw it behind some custom domain
Mhm.
so that you have that personal satisfaction that okay, I have something on my right, some abc.com or like your name.com or something like that. So you can basically do a redirect to Notion's website because those pages are publicly shareable. Uh, then again, if that's the first thing, primary thing. But if you want to explicitly go ahead and you are basically excited to create your own portfolio, um, go ahead and start using a lot of starter templates are available with Next.js or Gatsby.js. So just clone them, use them, tweak a lot of themes that fits your use case, and you should be done with it. That's like the second step if you don't want to
I
invest
mean, that's
a
also
lot of.
pretty straightforward. Yeah. Yep.
So you want to have something fancy and you want to just tweak the colors or themes. Just go ahead because they give you a lot of configurable options. Then the third thing comes in, which I don't think gives like a lot of people like about it because it takes a lot of energy. But yeah, I've seen it's up to your interest. If you want to invest in creating your portfolio, there's no harm. So again, if you are creating those portfolios, again the choice is yours what framework you want to use. Whether you want to just start with React if you have a lot of opinion, like if you are a lot of opinionated person and you have your what do you say, your template or your blueprint project that you always like to work in, go ahead and start working with that. So it's like how much time you are willing to invest in building these portfolios. If you're and what is your end goal? If your end goal is just to showcase your projects, go ahead and start using Notion.
I mean, earlier it also used to be GitHub pages, but now Notion is easier to set it up. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked a bit about portfolios. What else do you do you look at while hiring, especially let's say a fresher who wants to get into front end. So what all things excluding portfolio?
Okay, so when looking for freshers, right, the first thing is uh, how curious they are or how eagerly they want to get into front end. Uh, um, and for someone like fresher, right, again, it drills down to what they have to showcase, right? If they have some projects that they have worked upon, and if they are able to showcase them anywhere, be it their even on their GitHub README, right? Like these days, GitHub READMEs are again
Yeah.
a good things, right? So if even if they are able to put it there, I would go and start looking at those projects because the reason why I'm precisely highlighting that if you're into front end and you have some projects to showcase is that um, most of the folks, right? And this is not the problem with them. The problem is with the education system, right? People are asked or people are just taught to work on ML, AI, and a lot of things. So, which are again a lot of like, which is again a very very back end heavy things that people learn in college. So when I am looking for someone who's a fresher, right, I want to understand their curiosity for front end because I've seen a lot of people, right, where it's for them it's like I just need a job, be it front end or back end. And then when they come into front end, 2 or 3 months in the system, they don't feel comfortable working on front end, and they have explicitly asked to move them to back end. So that's precisely okay. But again, if you have something that, and if you're looking for specifically in front end, then it's better if you can showcase your projects. I would just go ahead and look at what you have done. It could be very simple as well, and no one is judging on the way, or no one is judging on the quality of the code. It's just that a glimpse or a acknowledgement that you sense that, okay, yeah, this person is actually interested in front end.
That's more than
So,
enough.
yeah, that's more than enough.
Sure.
And as far as if you are able to give that signal, I guess most of the people in the industry, they will understand your zeal or your curiosity to work in front end. But yes, if you're someone who is yet to explore, or who's trying to explore or experiment whether front end is for them or not, again, I would rather suggest go ahead and start building some projects. If it works, that project will become your showcasing project. And if it doesn't work, you will find your way that, okay, front end is not for you.
Right. Either way, it's a beneficial thing for you. Sure. So yeah, let's say now I have joined as a front-end developer. Now, if I want to move from UI1 to UI2, which is a senior developer, then what all things? So I'm asking this specifically to you because you have climbed up this ladder in really less amount of time, right? Which is really respectable and it's really inspiring. So wanted to understand like what's your secret sauce?
There's no secret sauce. It's literally your curiosity of handling things end to end. So for me personally, it was like whenever I'm working on projects, I usually don't like to work on things which I don't know where will they fit in the bigger picture, which basically pushes me to understand how our systems are built. So that literally pushes me saying that, okay, you need to discover this, and these parts. So when I'm trying to discover these parts, which means they literally came as, sometimes a lot of things came as problems, to which I kind of figured out that, okay, this might work out and this might be the solution to this. So that curiosity basically is the secret sauce. That, okay, this that helped me to push myself further and further. And again, it also depends on what, I won't say it's just uh, how do I put it? It's not just that how I was able to do it. Again, it depends on what sort of companies you are working in. I've been lucky in working with such companies and such managers and mentors, where I have basically got that space to work in. So it's not that this is the only way to do it, but it also, a lot of factors also comes into picture, that what sort of environment you are working in. I have personally seen such environments where even though you are doing a lot of things, maybe that's not recognized. So,
Yep.
and that is like a signal that, okay, maybe that place is not for you. So it doesn't like, uh, it all depends on a lot of factors, that what work you are doing, what is the environment that you got, and how are your managers, or how do you get recognized.
Right.
So a lot of factors comes into account when you are actually working in a corporate world.
Sure, but see, this is your personal thing how you worked out. But for someone who is like right now a UI1, what all minimum steps would you want them to take for them to actually start recognizing as a manager that okay, this particular person might be a fit for UI2 after a certain period, certain time period.
Uh, Tough question for me because I'm not a manager.
But
So
still, yeah,
uh, yeah, so I mean precisely, when you want to jump the ladder, right? I would say, like, my personal recommendation would be, don't look that you want to jump the ladder. If that is your end goal, you are chasing the wrong thing. That's what I have realized over the time. So your goal should not be to jump the ladder. Your goal should be that, okay, how do I improve myself, or how do I hold myself accountable for the things that I am doing? So for an example, uh,
that's
you are
nice.
someone, who's working on a project, right? And you released a feature, right? Something broke. uh, if you have that barrier in your mind saying that, okay, I am the UI1, or I am the junior front end engineer, it's not my responsibility to get into it. Maybe my senior would do it. That's literally, you are breaking the things over there,
That's a big
because
cross. Yeah.
yeah, that is basically you have set some strict or hard boundaries for yourself, and that is basically stopping you to step up in your career. Forget about the ladders in your career. But rather, if you look at it from a different perspective, where you're saying, okay, I released this feature and something broke, you basically get curious, okay, why did it broke? I want to get into it and I want to see and I want to fix things end to end. And while you are fixing it, might be the thing that it's not your like you would discover that okay, sometimes you would discover that the problem was not with your code, but
Yep.
because of some other infrastructure bits. The moment you get that idea, you have learned something new, right? And once you have learned something new, when you are working next time on a particular feature, you know what possibly could go wrong, and that's how your spectrum grows and grows. You understand that okay, these are the things like just imagine, right? When you started off, you don't know what JavaScript is, but the moment you started working on features, you identified okay, these are the things that a JavaScript can do. Now, when someone next time comes to you for a problem, you would know okay, what are the possible things, right? So this is how you grow in your career, right? And when you are growing, you would automatically get recognized because you are obviously doing things which other people are not trying to do. So since you have removed that uh,
Boundary.
levels
Yeah. That.
levels boundary in your head, you have basically made yourself like you have literally exposed yourself to much bigger challenges, and you're not confined or you're not restricting them based on your level. So the
Right.
moment you start doing it, obviously naturally you would be recognized. Like you yourself would not know that okay, you are doing this thing. That will come or that will become a natural way.
Nice.
So that's
That's a great
how
suggestion, man.
yeah.
All right. So cool. The last thing I want to touch upon is to understand like what exactly is Razorpay's front-end ecosystem. The reason being, I think there's something I had. So Chetty, I interviewed Chetty last time. So a lot of folks think because Razorpay is into fintech, right? The front end might not be that crucial, but at Razorpay, a lot of cool stuff are happening in the front end as well. So like
Yeah.
this is your platform to showcase it, and also in the end you can say we are also hiring. So yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a misconception where you think that, okay, uh, the only good things that can happen in front end are mostly on the consumer facing or companies which are into B2C and not companies into B2B. The problem is not that it's just that the complexity or the domain of the problem completely differs. So the challenges that you face could be different. So for an example, at Razorpay, right, the common challenges are the consistency between the products. So for someone, right, using different varieties, so Razorpay offers a lot of products, right, and few of them like we also offer product suites, and we also offer few set of different products, right, like Razorpay X, PG, and then we also have lending platform
Payment
upcoming, right?
gateway, yeah.
So it's like if you as a user are using multiple Razorpay's products and you are using Razorpay.com as well, there are a lot of inconsistencies across the way our design languages, across the way how our certain things look like, right? So, and that's a delight experience that we want to solve for. We and in doing so, we can't like it's basically how a company evolves, right? You evolve because you were basically into market fit, but at a certain point, you basically identify that okay, now is the time where I want to invest in these polishing the things, improving consistency, improving the delight experience part of it, right? This is where we are trying to solve things with like we are building design system of its own. That's like one of the things that we have been doing,
Which is
and it's
open
working
source
progress.
as well, right?
Yeah, it's open source from day zero. Uh, so the idea behind that was, and like even the designers would create consistencies, right? They themselves, like at the design team also grows, they themselves have to maintain some set of guidelines that if you are using a button, this is like how a button should be visible. This is a primary button, this is a secondary button, this is a link button, right? There are different varieties of it. And what are the fonts do we use? What are the what how should our typography should be? What are different visual hierarchies in when it comes to typography, right? What are some color palette or color theming that you want to use so that you don't feel very off looking at some places we use blue button. At some places we use a white button or something like that, right? How do you uh, how do you make these experiences consistent across your products? Because a lot of time people just invest in redoing the things. For an example, you want to build button, right? Now, since the team is so big, you would never know that someone in that particular team would have already built that button, and that's the button that I want to build, right? So and then once you build that button, you basically, the designer would come and say, okay, this padding that is missing in this button from the left, the border radius is off, the text is not aligned. Now this takes up a lot of time of designers as well as the developers, which means the moment we are growing, we are investing in the things, or we are redoing the things over and over, which is not scalable. Because if we have to, like, if we have more features to build, doesn't mean that we should have more people to solve for that, right? And if I have to now zoom out and see how how we can solve it, it's literally, we can fix that with design system. Because your design language can now be abstracted at one single place. Your design team also follows the design language, because it's a mutual initiative or a mutual language or a platform which is created by designers and developers both. So that's precisely where most of my time goes in, like, and that's where I mentioned that there are a lot of gaps between design and engineering, and I literally want to solve those, right? And again, design system, people solve it by design system, and there are a lot of benefits or the outcomes that you see. um, so that's
Was
one part of, yeah.
was this your pitch to bring in design system at Razorpay? Because this is convincing, really convincing.
Yes, exactly. That's the pitch that I used.
Sure, go ahead,
But
please.
plus I had a lot of different metrics as well, where which literally opened the eyes of people that where are we actually investing the time. So that's how we kind of agreed that okay, we need design system in our tech stack.
All
The
right.
second most the second most problem that we are facing at Razorpay is uh, a lot of times people, like, we build so many projects, the team is growing, there would be new set of developers coming in, they would be building their own tech stack. But now every team, or a lot of senior developers or any developers, are investing time in creating this base, right? Which is again frustrating, because there are so many types of different projects. For an example, you might be able, you might want to build React web project, you might want to build React native project, you want to build a Svelte project, you want to build a Node server, right? Or you want to add TypeScript to each of these projects, right? Now this is problematic because everyone would have their own set of opinions. Now, the problem is people would invest a lot of time, because setting up these tools the right way takes up a lot of
Yeah.
time. Now, imagine that this is a repetitive effort that you keep investing in, right? Every time I say that whenever I want to create a new project, it would take 3 to 4 weeks, and it would take two people to work on the base setup, right? Now, imagine that you have 10 projects to build, like you have 3 weeks into 10 projects, right? 30 weeks
That's a lot of man
into,
days.
yeah, 30 weeks into two people each team, right? That's literally a wasted effort, right? Uh, Second, there's a second problem is, even though assume that you did it right, now tomorrow you want to optimize for a performance across your projects. For example, you want to measure what is my time to interactivity in all my projects. Now, since you didn't have anything which is controlling this, or you don't have anything which is a common pattern, you would ask again one developer from each team to go ahead and integrate all these performance metrics into their projects.
Yep.
Tomorrow you want to add Sentry, which is again a
Error
monitoring
tracking.
tool
Yeah.
that will help you to error track your front end projects. Now, if you want to integrate that, you would again ask each of these developers to go ahead and integrate it. Now, the chances are that few of them might miss on certain things, or they might set it up in a different way, which might not be an ideal way, because which might not be an ideal way to set it up. Maybe because we won't be able to track certain metrics, or
Mhm.
we are not able to get meaningful information. But few of them would succeed it because they have done it in the past, right? Uh, Again, the next thing is, how do you have your CI sorted? Like, you need 5 things to always run a check against your PRs, right? But few teams did it because they had time. Few teams that didn't had time and they are not able to do it. Then
Mhm.
you also try to sort your deployments, because few team have their different set of terminologies or strategies to deploy certain things. Few teams are running on legacy code base, so they don't have any proper way to set up the deployment. And again, they are wasting a lot of time in deployments, right? So these are like a lot of drop-offs area, or these are like a lot of problems where your productivity or your developers are literally wasting time. Now, imagine if I give you a tool where I say this, that we will take the responsibility of helping you. If you want to create a new project, you create the project, and the moment you put it in production would be like just 10 minutes after you scaffold the project, right? So I give you a set of tools which has all these things predefined, and you can then go ahead and start building products. So the idea is that you focus on building products and leave the infrastructure bits to us. So that's again another track that we are, or another problem that we are solving in, with the help of a lot of CLI tools, a lot of scaffolding tools that we have built. Uh, so it's pretty simple that you just go ahead and say what type of project you want to scaffold, and it will ask you a bunch of information. Based on that, it will just configure your base setup. It will handle the builds for you for different environments. Let's say you want to work on development, you want to have your fast refresh setup, right? You want to have your you want to sort your linters, you want to sort your prettiers, you want to sort your CIs, you want to sort your CDs, right? It's everything. You just give us like few set of prompts, like name of the application and a couple of them. We will give you a set of project that you can take it and just deploy it, and you should be done with it. Now, now the moment I say that, okay, I have like, I will basically I want to enhance I want to drop in a new thing that we were using Service Worker by hand. Now I want to replace it with Workbox. I want to integrate core web vitals performance monitoring. I want to integrate Sentry. What I will do is I'll just add it to the main
Okay,
core
nice.
project and ask people to just upgrade it. The
To
moment
the
they upgrade
scaffolding
it,
project, yeah.
yeah, the moment they upgrade their version, right? Everything, like they get all these benefits out of the box without someone explicitly putting efforts into it.
Nice. But
So
is front end, so the project you're talking about is called Front End Universe for those who don't know. Is that open source though, right now?
not yet, but there
Are
are
you planning
plans. We are
to?
trying.
Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
please go ahead. Yeah.
So these are like two things that we are trying to solve at Razorpay. It's like the core of front end that we're trying to solve. And obviously, there are a lot of things that are already really great that are already happening. For an example, we have in-house no-code apps. So if someone wants to build their own set of payment pages, right, or they want to customize the checkout widget that we show, they can directly go ahead and just we give them a lot of configurable UI or knobs in the or the interface itself. They just do certain set of things, and then they just say publish. We basically give them like the configured widget for their use case, and they can just use that and embed it in their page. So it's like, this is again one more area where we say, okay, we are into going into no code apps. So people or any merchant or anything, any person who's an executive at some company, they want to modify certain things, they can just go ahead and do it and fit it based on their needs.
Yep.
So that's again an interesting area, or a lot of projects are being built in that area as well.
Interesting, interesting. I think you covered the holistic view of the front end ecosystem at Razor, but that's nice. Sure. All right. Cool. I think, Kamlesh, that's all we have. Thanks for taking out the time to do this. We discussed a lot of things. I think it's going to be a really informative podcast. Again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun to have this discussion.
All right. Thank you, man.